Hi everyone, in this video we will be working on this blue butterfly pattern loom bracelet. So in the last video we made this cloud pattern bracelet using this Miyuki Delica bead set. So this set is available in my Ko-fi shop, which I will put a link to, but I have also listed the colors that I used in the description section below as well as in the comments section if you want to get that from your own sources. So as I mentioned in that video, I plan to continue using this bead set to make more patterns, and the goal is to use up as much of these beads as possible. So this is project 2 of that special challenge that I gave myself. So I'll go ahead and put the pattern here on the screen for you to screenshot, and the high resolution versions will be available on my Ko-fi page for you to download to your devices or print. So 2 things about this pattern design to note are, the first is that there is a defined center in this pattern. So when you are adjusting the pattern to figure out how many rows you need to make your beaded section, you have to count up and down from the center to make sure that both sides are even. So for example, I have a 5.5 inch wrist and I want a 6 inch final size bracelet. So my beaded section will be 5 inches because 1 inch will be taken up by the clasp. So in the pattern, I need to take out these parts on the edges because I only need 74 or 75 rows to get to a 5 inch beaded section. The second thing to note is that parts of this tutorial will be a review, so feel free to skip to the part that you need. The thing that will be new in this video is that we will learn to create a cute brick stitch edge. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so let's get started warping this loom. So I'm going to be using my Bead Good Thread in the color white. And for this project, it is absolutely essential that we double the first and the last strand of this warp. So the project is 13 beads across, so we need to put 14 warp strands on the loom. So I'm going to take a length of this thread and I'm going to tie a double knot on this end. And to center the piece, I'm going to count from the middle. So 14 divided by 2 is 7. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to put the first warp strand here. And then also on the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right there. And I'm just going to loop this warp strand this way. And to double the first warp strand, I'm just going to put the thread back into the same slot that it was in before. So as you can see, this first warp strand is now doubled. So from here, I'm just going to do 14, and then I'm also going to double the last strand, which is the 14th strand. When I get to the middle, I'm going to start looping around the other knob just to even things out. And also, because I won't be able to fit this large spool into that space, I'm just going to run this spool back and forth to estimate how much more thread I'm going to need. So to do that, I'm just going to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to need 7 strands to make it 14, but I'm going to double the last strand, so I'm going to need to run it another 8 times to make it 15. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just a little extra for knotting and for safety reasons. So this should be enough for me to finish warping. So right here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then 14. And here is my doubling of my last strand. So that will be the last one. And now I'm just going to wind this around a couple times and tie a few knots to secure this last strand. Alright, so that's pretty secure, and now to make this a bit more tight, because as you can see it's kind of loose, I'm going to shove a Sharpie in there to stretch out these threads and make this a bit more tight. So to help with that, you just want to use a thick, strong sewing needle and not your beading needle to help pull those threads back so you can shove the Sharpie in there. So now the Sharpie is in there, so your threads should have a bit more tension to them. As you can see, they're not as loose anymore, so that's good. So for this pattern, you're going to need all 6 of your colors. And again, I will list them down in the description section below in the instruction sheet, and also I will pin them to the comments. So for the horizontal weft thread, we're still going to be using our John Bead Good Thread in the color white, and you're going to take about 5 feet of thread. And now you're going to tie a knot on the leftmost warp strand. And if you're left-handed, you're going to be doing the opposite. So you're going to be tying yours on the rightmost warp strand. And I'm going to give myself about a 6 to 8 inch tail, so about this much. And I'm just going to tie a very simple overhand knot like this. And you're going to position it about 1.5 to 2 inches from the edge of this slotted piece of wood. So here's how much tail I left. Just a little bit. And you're going to put the rest of your long piece of thread under all of the vertical warp strands over here. So just put everything under. So I've just put the longer side onto my size 10 beading needle, and I'm going to pick up my first row going from left to right if you are right-handed, and if you are left-handed, then you're going to be going from right to left. So I've just put on my first row of beads based on the pattern, and that first row is going to be different depending on where you're starting in the pattern, which is dependent on how long you need to make your beaded section. So just refer to the guidelines to figure that out. So now I'm going to slide it all the way down, and that knot is going to prevent your beads from sliding all the way out of your thread. And to begin putting on these very tiny delicas, I'm going to start from the right and go to the left and just do one at a time like this. So push the bead up with your finger and put one bead in each slot. So I'm going to start from the right like that. So put your needle over the vertical warp strand and through each of the beads, and then put one bead in each space, and then put your needle through the hole of that bead like that. And so by going one at a time like this, you can fix these beads into their spots first and not have to worry about them anymore. So just go like this, and eventually you'll make your way over to the left side. So make sure your needle is going over the vertical warp strands and not piercing any of them. So once you've put your needle through all the beads, you can go ahead and pull. So these spaces are way too wide for these beads, so we're just going to adjust the spacing of the threads so that they will better fit these small delicas. So to adjust these strands, we're just going to move them around, and to do that I have a thick strong needle. This is a tapestry needle, which I like to use because the end is blunt, but you can also use the same cheap strong sewing needle that you use to put the Sharpie in. Just do not use your beading needle because that one is too flimsy and thin to do this. So all I'm going to do is to take one of these strands and just move it to the slot. And what I'm doing is putting two strands into the same slot. And then I'm going to continue to move the next strands to the next slot over like this. And then I'm going to move this strand so that there's two in the same slot like that. And I'm just going to keep moving it over on both sides until I've done all of them. And so this is doubled, so I'm just going to put this in the one slot like that. So once you have consolidated your strands, then you should be able to have an easier time pulling the thread to make the warp strands better match the spacing of your beads. So I'm just going to do the other side. So now that the thread on both sides has been grouped together, this should be narrower, which would make it easier to pull this so that the spacing of the vertical strands will match the beads. But this isn't going to be fully secure until we do the second row, so let's do the second row. So to do the second row, you're going to put your needle under all of your warp strands again and pick up the beads in order from left to right if you're right-handed, or right to left if you're left-handed. So here's my second row, and my advice is to cross off or to mark your rows as you do them so that you don't get lost. So to do my second row, I'm just going to pop up the beads through the vertical warp strands like this. And I'm going to do the same and put my needle over all of the vertical warp strands and through each bead like this. And now when you pull, the spacing should be a lot more secure. Like that. It shouldn't move around as much. Now to prevent this row from moving around and also getting misaligned like this, I'm going to slide an extra beading needle in there to straighten out the row and also to secure it. And then you can flush your beads against that. And now as you can see, it's very straight. And what I like to do is to keep this needle there while I bead. And as I get further up, I will move this needle closer to where I'm beading, and that will help me keep my alignment as I go through the rest of my pattern. So here's my third row, and it should now be a lot easier to pop the beads up into their proper positions and put the needle through as well. So yeah, it should go a lot faster from here, so keep going in the pattern, and I will meet you back when you run out of thread and we have to add more thread. Alright, so I'm in a good spot now to add more thread. I only have this much left, so I'm just going to take my needle off of my current thread and leave that alone. And I'm going to cut myself another maybe 4 or 5 feet of thread. And I'm going to do exactly what I did when I first started looming, which is to tie a knot and leave about a 6 to 8 inch tail. And from here, I can just keep going. So I'm going to do what I did before and just put my longer side of the thread behind all of my warp strands, thread my needle, and just continue on. So here's my new knot that I've just tied, and I'm just going to put that right next to where I need to start again. And I'm just going to put in my next row. Pop up the beads and keep going like this. So I will meet you back here when you finish the rest of your beaded section, and we'll tie off all the extra tails. Alright, so I have just finished my 5-inch beaded section. So now I'm going to start tying off all the extra thread. However, I have a lot of thread left for this last row that I did. So what I'm going to do actually is tie it off, but I'm not going to cut this thread off, and I'm going to come out of one side of the bracelet. So let me do that now and I'll show you. So I'm going to turn this over because I like to work from the right side, and I'm going to take off my alignment needle. So to tie off, I'm just going to go back, do a couple of knots, zigzag, and do loops, and that will secure this thread. But I'm not gonna cut this off because I still have a lot of thread left, and I can use that to make the edging. So to tie off, I'm just gonna go back one row, and I'm gonna come out somewhere in the middle, like maybe around here. And I'm gonna go up and grab a thread bridge and draw a knot. So I'm grabbing the upper thread bridge. So when we are looming, we have a thread running at the bottom and another one over top. So I'm just grabbing the one that is in between these two beads that's running over top. Like that. I'm gonna draw it down, and I'm going to put my needle through this loop right there, and that's going to make a knot. And then I'm going to go back in the opposite direction and come out again. Somewhere in the middle. Not at the end, but somewhere in the weaving. Then I'm going to go up, grab another thread bridge, and tie one more knot because I prefer to make 2 knots. So after tying a knot, I'm going to go back and come out again, somewhere in the middle. Some people don't actually do knots, but I'm super paranoid, so that's why I do it. But technically, you don't have to knot. You can just zigzag backwards and do loops, and that should hold. So I'm going to go up again and go in the opposite direction. And I think that's pretty secure, so I'm just going to loop back. So I'm going to go down. So this knot that I made there is preventing my needle from going in, so you don't want to force your needle to go in if it doesn't want to go in. So I'm just going to go back 1 bead, and I'm going to go down from here so that I can avoid the knot that is hiding in this peach colored bead. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm just going to come down a little bit closer to the middle to avoid the knot that is hiding in that other bead. And this is very important, but we actually want to exit out of this third row. So this is 1, 2, and 3. So we want to exit out of the third row because we will start our edge from here. So we're going to leave this thread for now, and I'm going to tie off all these other extra tails. And for these middle threads, for this one, I'm going to tie this off going in this direction. And then for this one, I'm going to tie this off going in that direction. And that way I can distribute these two threads across different rows and not overfill a single row with the same two threads. Alright, so I have tied off all of the tails. So now I'm going to thread this last tail that is the long one on my beading needle, and I'll start to show you how we're going to start the edging. Alright, so to start the brick stitch edging, we will pick up 2 white beads. And know that when you start the brick stitch, it's going to be different than how you're going to continue the brick stitch. Alright, so there are my 2 white beads, and now we're going to go into the warp strand thread bridge between the 3rd and the 4th row. So here's the 1st and the 2nd, 2nd and 3rd. So we're going to start from the 3rd to the 4th, and I'm going to bring my needle inside in between those 3rd and 4th bead, like that. And I'm going to catch this outer warp thread. So let me just pull my thread through. And as I'm pulling my thread through, you're going to see that this is the first bead that I put on, and this is the second one that I put on further down the thread. I'm going to put my needle through this bead in this direction, like that. And when you pull down, they're gonna sit right next to each other. Now, this bead is gonna be a little loosey-goosey, so we're just gonna secure that by putting our needle back through that first bead in this direction, like that. And then we're gonna go back to this bead by going up again in this direction. So now we've put in our first 2 beads, and this start of the brick stitch, this is the only time we're going to be doing it this way. So we'll do this again when we start the other side, but this is just a special stitch to start it off. Another thing to note is that we use this thread bridge between the third and the fourth bead, but as you can see, these beads are sitting next to each other and they're sort of in the middle also of the second and the third bead for this first one. And remember that we're going to be putting this first row into a sliding in-tube clasp, so that's why we're skipping over to the third row first and putting our start of our brick stitch in between the third and the fourth bead. So with a brick stitch, we're only going to be using the outer warp thread bridges, and that is why we doubled the outer warp. It's so that we can have extra strength for doing the brick stitch. So next we're going to pick up a sapphire blue bead and a white bead. And then I'm going to go into the thread bridge between the fourth and the fifth bead on the outer warp like this. So I'm going to go in between these two beads and I'm going to pull my thread, and then so I picked up the blue bead first and then the white bead second, and I'm going to put my needle in this direction going up through the white bead. And when you pull, what's going to happen is this white bead is going to sit next to the other white beads, and this blue bead is going to sit on top in the middle of those two white beads, in between this white bead and this white bead. And if you will notice, this blue bead is going to be sitting at a right angle direction. So for these two brick stitch white beads, the hole is facing this way, but this colored blue bead, the hole is facing in this direction. So that's correct. So you just want to finagle it so that the blue bead is sitting like this. So next, because we've just picked up the blue bead and a white bead, we're gonna pick up just one white bead, and the pattern that we're gonna do this is 2 1 2 1. So we've just picked up 2, so now I'm only gonna pick up one white bead. I'm going to drop that down, and I'm going to put my needle in between the 5th and the 6th bead right here, which is, it's the next thread bridge over. And once again, I'm going to put my needle through this bead in this direction. So remember that it should be this direction and not the other direction. So the direction where your tail is, you're gonna put it back up like that way. And that's gonna sit right next to this white bead. So now that we've put down 1, next we're gonna do another 2. So 2 1 2 1. So a blue bead and a white bead. And we're gonna go into the next in between thread bridge right there. And put your needle through only the white bead, going back in this direction. So then the blue bead is going to sit in a perpendicular direction like that. So now that we've done 2 beads, the next bead is going to be 1 white bead. And go through the next in between thread bridge right there. Pull. and go back in this direction. So now that there are two white beads next to each other, and we've just only put down one, now you know that we have to put down two. So it'll be a blue bead and a white bead. Put your needle through to the next thread bridge over there. And again, put your needle back through the white bead only. And you can fix the blue bead so that it's sitting nicely perpendicularly between the two white beads. So now you can see the pattern emerging when we do the 2-1-2-1. So it's gonna be every other space will have a blue perpendicular bead on it, which will give it a cute little fluttery scalloped effect. So when you look at the pattern sheet that I gave you, each blue butterfly is paired up with its own color of sticking out bead. So this light blue butterfly is paired up with a medium sapphire blue bead, and then this medium sapphire blue butterfly is paired up with a salmon bead like this, and then this dark blue butterfly is paired up with a gold bead. So that will be the color of bead that you're going to pick up as your first bead when you're doing the brick stitch that has the two beads on it. If you ever get lost as to whether or not you're only picking up one white bead or two beads, a blue bead and a white bead, just look at the previous stitch, and let's say this is blue and white, then you know that the next bead that you're going to be picking up is white. And when you see two white beads next to each other, then you know that the next bead that you are picking up is a blue color bead and a white bead. So I'm keeping my loom steady just for filling purposes, but when I am putting all of these brick stitch edging together, you'll see me move the loom around so that I can have a better time with stitching it on. So yeah, keep going, and I'll meet you back when you run out of thread and we want to continue on by adding new thread. Alright, so I still have a lot of thread, but I'm going to pretend that I am running out of thread and show you how to add more thread in case you need to do that. So I'm coming out of this brick stitch bead right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my needle back in through this back bead, and if you're having a hard time putting your size 10 beading needle through this bead because it's getting thready, then what you can do is switch out your size 10 beading needle for a size 12 beading needle, which will be a thinner needle. So I'm just gonna put my needle back in this way. So I'm going back 1. And then I'm just going to put my needle in through a row that is close to that bead. So I'm gonna pick this row right here. So I'm just gonna put my needle in. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna tie this thread off. So I'm gonna come out somewhere in the middle like this. And I'm gonna go back another row. Pick up a thread bridge and make a knot. Go back. Pick up another thread bridge and make a knot. Go back in the opposite direction as before. And now I'm gonna do some zigzags and a couple loops. And I'm gonna cut this old thread. So to add more thread, we need to come out of the same bead that we stopped at before, which is this white bead at the end of our brick stitch. And so we need to come out this way. And so to come out this way, we need to secure our thread. Maybe 3 rows back would work. So to go out this way, we can go in this direction. So this way, and this way. So I'm just going to put my thread through a thread bridge around here, and I have actually switched over to my size 12 beading needle, which is way thinner than my size 10, just so that it would be easier for me to pass through the whole of these beads because they are getting a little thready. And I'm just going to pull my thread through until I'm close to the tail, and I'm just going to tie a simple overhand knot to secure this tail. So I'm just gonna tie a simple knot like that, and I'm going to secure this tail like that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and cut the excess close to the knot like that. So now I'm just gonna follow the thread path that we figured out in the beginning to be able to get out through this bead. So we're gonna go right, and then I'm going to catch a thread bridge in the row above, and I'm going to tie another knot, and I'm going to go back this way. And also, if I forgot to mention, I put another 5 feet of new thread on my needle. And I'm gonna go up 1. But before I exit out of that bead, I'm just gonna loop around once just to make sure my tail is extra secure. And now I'm going to exit out of this bead. And I'm going to continue my brick stitch. So my next brick stitch will be a pink and white. I'll probably switch back to my size 10 beading needle because the size 12 is just a little too thin and bendy. Alright, so I'm going to do my last brick stitch, and I'm going to go into between the second and the third row of beads, so over here. So I'm just gonna add a white bead because I ended with a blue and a white, so now I'm just gonna do 1 white like that. So sit that down right there, and now I'm going to go over to the other side. So to do that, I'm gonna back out of 1 like this. And remember how on the other side we started on the third row? So that's also where I'm going to start on the other side. I'm gonna put my needle through the third row like this. And come out of the third row on the other side. And I'm going to turn my loom over. Because I'm right-handed and it's just easier for me to work in this direction on the right side. So from here, we're going to do what we did in the beginning, which is to start our brick stitch with 2 white beads. So I've put 2 white beads on my needle, and now I'm going to go on the outside warp thread bridge between the 3rd and the 4th row of beads, right there. So here's the first bead that I put in, and here's the second bead. So I'm just going to go through the bead in this direction. And when I pull my thread, it's going to sit the 2 white beads next to each other, like that. As you can see, this bead is loosey-goosey, so we are just gonna go back down in this direction, like that, to secure it. And go back up this second bead right here. And when you pull, it's going to secure that first bead, like that. And now we're going to pick up a blue bead and a white bead and continue brick stitching. And sit your blue bead perpendicular like this. And now that you've put 2 beads down, the next bead is just the 1 white bead, and so forth and so on until you get to the end. Alright, so I am at the very end now, so I'm just going to go in between the 2nd and the 3rd row here and finish up with 1 white bead with this. And I'm going to start tying off my thread by going back 1 and going into one of these rows and doing my knots and my zigzags and circling back down to the very end row, and from there I'm just going to start my weaving. But it looks like there's a bunch of thread here, so I'm going to switch over my size 10 beading needle back to a size 12 beading needle. I've switched back to my size 10 beading needle, and now I'm going to make a weaving by going over under on these warp strands 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me just show you. So I'm going under, and then so I'm going under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, and under, like that. And when you pull, that's your first thread that you've woven in, and I'm just gonna push it in with my needle like this. And I'm ending on an over, as you can see, it's going over. So now I'm gonna go under so that I can go back and hook this warp strand on the very end. So I'm gonna go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, like that. So I'm going to go back this way. I'm going to push everything in with my needle, like that. And now I'm ending on an over, so I'm just going to go back under. And now I'm going to go one last time, and that'll be my fourth pass through, and then I will tie a knot and work on the other side. So I'm just going to tie a knot. And another one. So I'm going to double knot it. And that's fine. And now I'm going to work on the other side. So I'm just going to cut this. Leave a short tail so that your knot doesn't come apart. To start on the other side, I'm just going to grab a thread bridge. I'm just going to tie a knot close to the end of my tail to secure this thread, like that. And I'm just going to come out of the last row of beads. And then I'll start my weaving. So now that we're done with the weaving, it's time to release this bracelet from the bead loom so that we can start tying down the warp strands and gluing them down. And you also want to cut all the loops. So now I'm going to protect my surface with a piece of plastic. I'm going to secure this bracelet with a piece of tape, and I happen to have Scotch Magic tape with me right now. So to secure the knots, I recommend E6000 PLUS over regular E6000 just because E6000 PLUS is low odor. I'm just going to take some out by squeezing some from this tube a little bit a ways from the bracelet. And to cap it, you're just going to squeeze a little bit out until you see a little bit coming out, just to make sure there's no air inside, and cap. Now I'm going to go from left to right, and I'm going to grab the first two strands of this bracelet, and I'm going to tie a surgeon's knot. So a surgeon's knot is left over right, like this, and put the strand through the loop twice, like this. And you're going to end up with something very twisty like that. And before I draw down this knot fully, I'm just going to apply a little bit of glue to the end. And be careful because E6000 is very gummy, as you can see, so it can get really messy really fast. So just use a little bit at a time. So I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of glue there. And just work slowly and carefully so it doesn't become a big mess like that. Just a tiny drop of glue. And I'm going to draw this knot down like this. So I originally went left over right, so now I'm going to go right over left, and I'm going to put this through the loop once. And for security, I'm going to do one more knot. So my last time I went right over left, so this time I'm going to go left over right. And draw down just once. And set this aside using a weight. So I'm going to use the glue as a weight. So I'm going to grab the next 2 strands and we'll do that one more time and then I'll do the rest. If you're having a hard time gluing down while trying to tie a knot, you can also add glue ahead of time, like that, because it's the same thing. So a surgeon's knot, again, is left over right, and then put that tail through the loop twice. So that's once, and then twice. And you're going to end up with something that looks very twisty like that. Draw that down. And then right over left. And just looped once. And then left over right. So the order is left over right and then twice, and then right over left and then once, and then left over right once. So once I'm done knotting everything down, I'm just going to put even more glue over all the knots and over the weaving. And it's okay if you get a little bit into that last row of beads, because that last row of beads is going to go into the sliding end tube clasp. So all this mess is not going to be seen ultimately. So I am just putting glue all over. And I'm also going to lift this up and do the other side a little bit. So just do the same for the other side. So once you are done with tying all the knots and gluing everything down, take out the bracelet. So make sure you don't set your bead loom over any of the E6000 glue. And what I like to do is I just like to hang it like that, so that either ends are suspended, and the E6000 glue is going to take about 24 hours to cure, so I'm going to wait until tomorrow to cut off all the excess thread and put it into the sliding end tube clasp. Alright, so it's been a day, so the glue has cured and it's time to trim the thread. So as you can see, this glue has a bit of a rubbery and gummy consistency. So it does create some extra bulk, and that is why we want to make our weaving on the thinner side, because of all this extra stuff that we're going to need to be able to fit into the sliding end tube clasp. So when I cut off the extra thread, I want to leave a little bit of a tail just to make sure that I am not cutting off any of the knots. And I'm going to take a little bit of E6000 PLUS So I'm just going to put a little bit of E6000 PLUS into my sliding end tube clasp to further secure the ends of my bracelet. And now I'm going to start sliding in my last row of beads. So I'm just using my fingernail to separate out that last row a little bit so that it'll be easier for me to slide all the beads in. Like that. I think my sliding end tube clasp is maybe a little small, but I'm just going to try to close it up and see if I could just push that last little bit in. So I'm just going to use my plier to close this halfway, and then I'm going to use my table to close it the rest of the way. Like that. And it looks like it worked. It's pretty closed for the most part, so I'm satisfied with this. So I'm just gonna do the other side. Alright, so after putting in the sliding end tube clasp, I'm going to start finishing the rest of the bracelet. And as usual, I will be using split rings instead of regular jump rings because the loop at the end of the sliding end tube clasp is very thin, and I find that it does slip out of the opening of regular jump rings. So with a split ring, you don't have that issue because it's like a keychain ring, so it coils around and there's no opening. I'm going to use a split ring opener to open it up like so, and I'm going to drop down my charms that I made in advance. These are just beads that I put into a ball pin. And I'm also going to drop down one side of the bracelet, and I'm going to use a plier to twist it. So that part is done. And for the other side, I'm going to drop down my lobster clasp and the other side of the bracelet. So now everything is attached. So this is the final result. I really hope that you enjoyed this project, and I really like the edges. I think that it really does add a little bit more shimmer to the final result. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me for this project. And once again, if you would like to support this channel, I do have these bead sets available in my Ko-fi shop, and I have added shipping to the US. So now I ship to Canada and the US. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!